Second service, how we doing? Fantastic. Hey, let me just add my 2 cents on today and what's happening outside. Hey, every year, this is 4 years now, we just kind of do a one-off kind of extravaganza of generosity, and we make generosity on sale, $39.95 for y'all, and we just try to raise a bunch of money for our nonprofit partners, and you guys have been incredible the last 3 years. You've already raised over those 3 years over $90,000, which is like blow my mind, so give yourselves a hand. And so we give 100% of it. There's nothing taken off the top. We just turn around and give it to our nonprofit partners. They're game-changing dollars for them. They are life-changing dollars for the people that they serve. And so after the service, definitely there's 2 lines. There's a cash line, and there's a swipe your card line, and just pony up, and be generous today as we come together and make our city a little bit of a better place. Great nonprofit partners today. We've got Salt and Light, they work with people experiencing homelessness, Young Lives, teen moms, Sleep in Heavenly Peace. They provide beds for kids that don't have beds. And then, of course, our ongoing work in the Houston neighborhood. There's just so many amazing things happening. And so, so after the service, go out, grab a free piece of pie. It's not free, it's $39.95. So you pay, and then you go and get your pie and say hi to the partners and ask them any question you like. So with that said, we're talking friendship in the month of November, and I've been thinking about friendship a lot, and thinking about my friends, but also thinking about some of those classic movie friendships from like some of our favorite movies out there. The first one that came to mind for me when I was thinking about classic movie friendships, Goose and Maverick. You know these guys, right? There they are. This is maybe the greatest bromance of all time. And if you've not seen sort of Maverick Part 2 or Top Gun Part 2 or whatever, you really should. It's fantastic. What about Sam and Frodo from the Lord of the Rings trilogy? All right, some of the super nerds are rising to the top. Remember that scene? I think the movie's like the last one, Return of the King, and Sam and Frodo, they're so close to finishing their task of destroying the one ring of power, but they're also on the verge of failure. They're just out of gas. They can't go another inch, and it's in this moment that Sam says to Frodo, who's lost all of his strength, I can't carry the ring, right, for you, but I can carry you, right? It's this amazing moment. Everyone's like, oh my God, it's beautiful. Fantastic moment. What about Olaf and Anna from the Disney animated Frozen? Do you remember that part in Frozen Part 1? Anna's freezing to death. She's just been rejected by that jerk, Prince Hans. She's feeling completely worthless, like this is it, right? Nobody loves her. She's at her lowest point, and in walks Olaf, the snowman, and he sees the situation, dire straits, immediately runs, starts a fire, drags Anna close to the fire, and as a part of doing that begins to melt. He's a snowman after all. And Anna opens her eyes and cries out, Olaf, you're melting, to which Olaf replies, some people are worth melting for. Oh, that is a moment, right? What about Bill and Ted from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure? Come on, one of the great friendships of all time. If you've never seen Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, or you don't like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, you've got problems. So what about Han and Chewie? Han and Chewie from Star Wars, fantastic. Kirk and Spock? You know, Kirk and Spock? Oh, there's the super nerds, right? What do you call people that love Star Trek? Trekkies? Is that what they're called? Yeah. Well, do you remember powerful scene in Wrath of Khan? And Spock says to Captain Kirk, I have been and always shall be your friend. And for those of you in law enforcement, there is no greater cop friendship than Roger Murtaugh and Martin Riggs, right? And there's no moment that defines their relationship better than when Murtaugh says to Riggs, have you ever met anybody you didn't kill? To which Riggs replies, well, I haven't killed you yet. What about that movie? Do you remember the movie Stand By Me? Right, classic. Story of four 12-year-old friends during Labor Day weekend, 1959. Gordy, Chris, Teddy, and Vern, there they are. And at the end, Gordy is sort of narrating the story, and he makes this remark at the end of the movie. I never had any friends later on like the ones I had when I was 12. Does anyone? And then, of course, over the last 20 years, 2 decades, a holy trinity of friendship has risen among us. Harry Potter, Ron Weasley, and Hermione Granger. Now, there's actually, in the book, not the movie, there's a rather powerful moment in the book, The Half-Blood Prince. As the book comes to a close, their mentor, their leader, Professor Dumbledore, has been murdered, and it's after the funeral, and Harry's taking this walk around the lake. Eventually, he's just sort of reflecting on the fact that from here on out, his story's going to be defined by this epic conflict with Lord Voldemort, the evil Lord Voldemort. Eventually, he's joined by Ron and Hermione, and they have this conversation, and it goes like this. Harry says, "I'm not coming back to Hogwarts, even if it does reopen." "I knew you were going to say that, but then what will you do?" "We'll be there, Harry, at your aunt and uncle's house, and then we'll go with you wherever you're going." And Harry's like, "Absolutely not. That's not going to happen. You said to us once before that there was a time to turn back if we wanted to. We've had time, haven't we?" And then Ron's line, "We're with you whatever happens." We're with you whatever happens. We're moved by these kinds of friendships and the relation, right? These kind of words, relationships that these words represent. I think we're moved by them, but I also think we don't have a lot of experience with them. We don't have a lot of experience with the "we're with you whatever happens" kinds of friendships. We've lost the art, the capacity, the practice of "some people are just worth melting for" kinds of friendships. And last week, we opened our Friendsgiving teaching series, and we discussed really at length sort of our lack of deep, true, meaningful friendships. And I threw up some rather frightening statistics up there. I'll just remind you of a couple, right? 58% of American adults consider themselves lonely. But the younger you get, the worse it gets. 73% of Generation Z, that's your kids, that's your grandkids, report feeling lonely either sometimes or always, 3/4 of them. To add emphasis, here's a new stat for you this week, 42%. 42% of millennial women are more afraid of loneliness than a cancer diagnosis. 42% of women between the ages of 26 and 40 years old are more terrified of loneliness than cancer. And in some respects, it makes some sense when we consider what it is we know about loneliness and its impact on our physical health. Again, to remind you of our discussion, right? We talked about how loneliness reduces our lifespan the same way that smoking 15 cigarettes a day reduces our lifespan. Having a ton of acquaintances and no deep friendships is quite literally killing us. Even the ancient Jewish wisdom writers were able to observe this. They didn't know what we know about loneliness and its impact on our health, but they could see that weak social connections devastate our capacity to thrive as human beings. Listen to this proverb. A person of many companions, a person with lots of social media friends, a person with lots of friendly acquaintances may come to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. I think we've lost the art, the understanding, the capacity for real, deep, meaningful friendship. We've diminished the concept of friendship to likes and friends and followers on our favorite social media platforms. Our concept of friendship has been depleted and robbed, really, of all of its significance. And to show you what I'm talking about, I actually want to take you back in time and to a moment in history when the concept of true and deep and meaningful friendships mattered and was often the topic of conversation by the most educated and celebrated thinkers within history. One example comes from Aristotle. Aristotle, if you're unfamiliar, is a towering intellect from Greek philosophy. He lived about 350 years before Jesus, and he actually wrote 2 books on friendship. And Aristotle's understanding, and I can't overemphasize this, how Aristotle understood friendship directed how all cultures understood friendship for the most part, at least the Western cultures understood friendship until about 200 years ago, when we sort of took a radical left turn and the idea of deep friendship kind of almost vanished, where now it's nice, but not really essential for living. And Aristotle, he said, listen, I think we can divide friends up into 3 categories, and they're all good, but one's the best. And he said the first category of friendship is entertainment friends. These are just the friends that are cool to hang out with, right? These are the guys you go golfing with. These are the people you go down to Barrel House with. These are the people you grab a coffee with, right? They're good hangs, right? It's those people. These are friends you have a great time with. And that's a legitimate kind of friendship, and we need entertainment friends, absolutely. But Aristotle said, listen, there's not just entertainment friends. There's also what he called purpose friends. These are friends that you share a common purpose with. These are your work friends. These are the friends that maybe you're on the same soccer team down at 1852 with, right? I mean, there's friendships have this mutually beneficial because you both have the same goal in mind, right? And we need purpose friends, right? That's a legitimate type of friendship, and we need them. We need entertainment friends. We need purpose friends. But Aristotle observed, listen, but there is a highest form of friendship, a friendship that he called virtue friends. Essentially, that the virtue was the friendship, that the friendship is just good in and of itself, that your love for your friend isn't rooted in entertainment value, it's not rooted in working towards a mutually beneficial goal, that you love your friend based on their inherent worth, without any strings attached. That's it. This is the kind of friendship, Aristotle argued, that lasts, because once they're not fun anymore, and once the goal's been reached, you're still friends. Aristotle argued, he said, virtue friends, this is the only form of friendship that we could call true friendship, or deep friendship, or meaningful friendship. Here's what he wrote about virtue friendship. He said, a friendship that ends was actually never a true friendship. And here's the thing, entertainment friends and purpose friends, those friendships end all the time. Not much drama attached to it, right? Just whatever, they were in my life for a season, they're not now, okay, that's fine. But here's where pain comes, and many of you know this pain, is when you think you have a true friend, but they only ever saw the friendship as entertainment or purpose, and they move on from you. That's a pain that goes deep. Aristotle, along with other philosophers and thinkers, they believe that true friendship, virtue friendship, deep friendship, however we want to talk about it, is an absolute requirement for you thriving and becoming the best version of yourself. You could not be the best version of yourself, they believed, without virtue friendship. Virtue friendship is a requirement to become the very best version of yourself. That if you want to tap into your potential as a human, you absolutely need other people in your life to help you become all that you could be, and that they know you, the real you, they understand you, and they are, for whatever reason, absolutely committed, no matter what happens, to encouraging you along the journey. The ancients believed that friendship was the glue that held society together, that our health as a society would never outrun the depth of our truest friendships. And listen, our culture is so different. We really don't talk about friendship all that much. And when we do, when we talk about the glue of society, what do we talk about? We don't talk about friendships. We come up with this idea of nuclear family, right, and marriage. But this is new in the history of the world. For thousands of years before us, people believed that it was the depth of our truest friendships that actually held society together. And that virtue friendship or friendship love is the absolute highest form of love that you could experience, that it's not romantic love. Friendship love was the goal. Because in the ancient world, listen, in the ancient world, if your spouse happened to also be your friend, you just got lucky, right? That was not a requirement. Your spouse being your best friend was not expected. And I would say this, I think that Aristotle and other ancient thinkers were right and wrong on this issue. On the one hand, I think it's rather unfortunate that the ancients didn't see marriage as a place that you could cultivate and grow, like virtued, true, deep friendships. Marriages should be pursuing friendship, love. But I also think Aristotle's right in that friendship love is better than romantic love, because romantic love is rather short-lived. It can be rather fickle. Friendship love is this love that's sort of based on the other's inherent worth and your commitment to helping them be the best that they can be. That's a much better love than romantic love, which is oftentimes just simply based on like libido or sexual attraction, all of that. Definitely important part of a covenant marriage relationship. But friendship love is more the glue. And then maybe I would just add this when it comes to marriages. Your spouse should not be your only sort of true, deep, meaningful, virtuous friendship. In fact, the data is overwhelmingly clear on this issue. The strongest marriages are the marriages that have strong friendships outside of the marriage. We get into a mess and we put way too much unnecessary strain on our marriage relationships when we put on our spouse, hey, you've got to meet all of my relational needs. That's your job. Nobody can handle that kind of pressure, nor is your marriage relationship ever meant to carry that kind. It'll buckle. Your marriage will buckle under that kind of pressure, right? No marriage can do it. It's a little Pollyanna, right? It's a little like, I officiate a lot of weddings, and here's what I hear a lot, today I'm marrying my best friend. Okay. I'm just a cynical jerk, but listen. It's great. You should be marrying a friend, one of your friends. Absolutely, that's true. But sometimes attached to that is like, and I don't need anyone else. I just have to look into your eyes and it'll all be magic. No, it won't. That's not how it works in life, right? Absolutely not. This is how the ancients, and particularly Aristotle, talked about friendship love. He said, listen, what's a friend? What's a friend? It's a single soul dwelling in two bodies. Whoa. Listen, today, that statement we attach to romantic, marriage, sort of sexually intimate relationships. We do not talk about our buddies like that. Hey, you guys are good friends, yeah? Oh yeah, totally. We're a single soul dwelling in two bodies. We just don't talk about it that way. It doesn't mean that friendships shouldn't be deep and meaningful and have some version of this. Of course, I think they should, right? But, up until 200 years ago, this is how friendship was talked about. Not sexual relationships, not intimate relationships. Friendship relationships were talked about as a single soul dwelling in two bodies. This is that Samwise Gamgee, right? I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you. This triumphant, moment. Or it's Jesus of Nazareth. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's, listen, not their spouse, their friends. Greater love has no one than a kind of friendship love that you'd be willing to sacrifice your life for. Could that include your spouse? Of course, absolutely. But that's not how Jesus frames it. Maybe because he didn't have a spouse. And again, I think especially in the Christian subculture, we've sort of elevated marriage to some sort of like form of godliness. Probably unwise considering if you're a Christian, the one you follow never got married. And he says, listen, like the ancient traditions, he talks about friendship in a way that you're so close you would sacrifice yourself on your friend's behalf. Now, you know what I find really interesting is that the early church actually picked up on Aristotle's idea of virtue friendship. But instead of calling it virtue friendship, they called it spiritual friendship. Because they said, listen, yes, Aristotle, you're onto something, kind of cultivating virtue and sort of deep, meaningful, true friendships, absolutely. But we've got to add something to it. We need those friendships to also help each other grow in our capacity to live like Jesus. The Christian church replaced virtues with learning to live like Jesus. And again, we say this a lot around here, but at Neighborhood, we call ourselves a Jesus church. And all that means really is that we hold Jesus of Nazareth up as the model for what it means to be a human. And so when it comes to any topic under the sun, I mean, we bring up all kinds of stuff. We bring up sociology and psychology and history and today ancient Greek philosophy. But at the end of the day, we will always land on what did Jesus have to say about it. And that certainly includes friendship, yes? And spiritual friends, they certainly maintain all of Aristotle's understanding of virtue friendship. Yes, of course. Friendship just built on love without any strings attached, just the other person's inherent worth. Yes, yes, yes. But spiritual friends also inspire each other towards Jesus likeness. A spiritual friend is someone who can walk with us, to challenge us, to be the kind of person that God has called us to be. We cannot live this life alone without others, right? We just can't. We cannot do it. We need people who know us and are okay pointing us in the right direction when we get off track. Around here, we talk about that just by saying, listen, Christianity isn't a me faith, it's a we faith. We have to do this together. Consider the ancient author of the Christian scripture, anonymous, but wrote this. Let us consider how we, our friends, may spur one another on towards love and good deeds. Or again from the ancient Jewish wisdom literature, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. You know, this has conflict built in, yes? Like, part of being a deep, true, virtuous, spiritual friend with someone is saying, you're being an idiot, right? You are off track. Let's help you get on track, right? It's not always sharpening is sort of can be a bit of a violent thing in the best possible way when it comes to friendship. Don't hit your friends. That would be bad, right? But, and this is also important because I think sometimes the Christian church, we've just done this so wrong. We think, yeah, we've got to like hold people accountable. I hate that phrase, by the way, but like, because we run around thinking we need to hold anybody accountable. That's not how it works. You point people and encourage people that have given you permission to do so. And we should all absolutely have people in our lives that we've given permission to speak into our lives hard truths, and that they've given us permission to speak into their life. We don't get to run around telling people they're naughty just because. We've given permission, we're this virtuous spiritual friendship, and because of that, we can speak into each other's lives. You know, the medieval church actually took this idea of friendship to a whole other level. They actually would celebrate friendship by holding friendship covenant ceremonies, the same way you'd hold like a marriage ceremony or baptism or some other kind of serious sort of moment in your life. They would quite literally, two friends would stand up in front of other friends and family and their creator, and they would promise friendship to each other. I was actually able to dig up a prayer that was prayed at one of these friendship covenant ceremonies. It's a little weird. This was from like 600 years ago, so they talk funky, but we'll get through it. Here's what was prayed at this friendship ceremony. O Lord, our God Almighty, who was and is to come, who did not disdain to be born of humankind in the womb of the Virgin Mary, Mother of God, send your holy angel. Again, that's just a lot right there, right? But they're just saying, Jesus, you're great. Upon these your servants, and then they put their names, John and Thomas, that they may love each other as your holy apostles, Peter and Paul loved each other, and Andrew and James, and John and Thomas, and James and Philip, and Matthew and Simon, and Thaddeus and Matthias, right? And your holy martyrs, guys that have died for their faith, Sergius and Bacchus and Cosmas and Damien, not through the bonds of birth. Like, these people are together not because they're siblings, but through faith and by the love of the Holy Spirit, that they may abide in the same love all the days of their lives. And then after this ceremony, the sworn friends would be known no longer simply by their own given names, but in relationship to each other. I am John, the friend of Thomas. I am Thomas, the friend of John. Now, I get it. 21st century eyes, what are you talking about, right? There is no way I'm calling my buddy up and saying, hey, so my church does this friendship thing. That would just, right? But again, and we see this kind of stuff and we're like, how is sexual intimacy not tied to that, right? But again, the ancients just talked about friendship and understood friendship so much differently than we do, and have been for about the last 200 years. Now listen, the idea of spiritual friendship, it didn't find its origins in Aristotle and Greek philosophy, and because before Goose and Maverick, and before Harry, Ron, and Hermione, and all of the famous friends that we know, before all of them, the ancient Jewish authors actually wrote a lot about a rather famous friendship between two guys, Jonathan and David. And for just the last couple of minutes we're together, I just want to walk you through their friendship, because this is the root. This is what inspired the Christian church's concept of spiritual friendship. So Jonathan, his father was a guy named Saul, and Saul was named the first king over the nation of Israel. And Saul started off pretty good, but he quickly kind of just became a knucklehead, bit of a nightmare. And eventually, as the story is told, God says to Saul, listen, I'm going to take your kingdom away from you and your family, as in your line is not going to continue to lead Israel. We're shutting it down because you're that much of a knucklehead, right? And in the meantime, while all of that's happening, there's this unknown teenager named David. And he's being anointed by a Jewish prophet named Samuel in secret to be the next king, right? And so eventually David, this happens, right? It's just this crazy thing. And then David actually finds his way to the national stage of Israel because he has this epic kind of conflict, and he defeats a giant named Goliath. Maybe you've heard that story before. And King Saul, he's still unaware that David's been anointed to be the next king, and David's now famous, so he invites David onto his palace staff. So David's now hanging out at the palace with the king, and it's while serving in the palace that David and Jonathan meet each other and become close friends. Here's how it gets recorded. When David had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was bound to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. Sounds a little bit like how Aristotle talked about virtue friendships. However, this was written about 150 to 200 years before Aristotle, so maybe Aristotle was influenced by some of this ancient Jewish writing. When David had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was bound to the soul of David, right? I mean, powerful moment. Well, eventually, the friendship kind of gets tested because David lets Jonathan know that he's already been chosen to be the next king. And it's with this knowledge, suddenly, Jonathan and David, they know their friendship is going to be pushed to the limit. Jonathan now, he knows he's put in this impossible situation, right? His father is going to want him to be the next king. He's the oldest son, right? And as soon as he finds out that he's not going to be the next king and that David's already been anointed to be the next king, that his dad was going to try to kill David. He knew it. So now Jonathan's sort of caught in the middle, and he had to choose a side. Either he would accept what God had decided and give up his own claim to the throne of Israel, side with his friend, or he could resist God, fight against it, pursue his claim to the throne, and take his stand with his father. Well, Jonathan makes his choice. If God had chosen David to be the next king of Israel, so be it. Who was Jonathan to fight against it? Jonathan would give David his full loyalty. In fact, they actually enter into a covenant. They kind of have a little moment together, much like, and it is this moment that inspired later on those sort of friendship covenant ceremonies. Here's how it gets recorded. Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as himself. Jonathan took off the robe he was wearing, gave it to David along with his tunic and even his sword, his bow, and his belt. Right? David, whatever the cost, whatever the future, whatever it takes, I want you to know that you can count on me. I'm with you, whatever happens. Well, of course, the relationship does get tested because Jonathan's dad, King Saul, finds out about David and he goes on this murderous rampage. There's even one moment that gets reported where Saul just chucks a spear at David while he's just playing some music, and it's really intense, right? And again, Jonathan has David's back, and David in return has Jonathan's back. And he says to Jonathan, look, I know how we roll in the ancient world is once, I'm king, I have the right to kind of murder not just your dad, but like everybody else in your family, like so that there's no more of your family that even exists. And David sort of promises to Jonathan, I won't do that. When I become king, I'm not going to kill off your family. I'll protect your descendants, right? And they have this one last interaction that gets recorded. And here's what we read. Jonathan said to David, go in peace, for we have sworn friendship with each other in the name of the Lord, saying the Lord is witness between you and me and between your descendants and my descendants forever. That's them saying we won't kill off each other's family tree. And this is their last interaction, at least it gets recorded. And then after tragedy strikes, Jonathan is killed in battle against Israel's sworn enemies, the Philistines. And later what gets recorded is not an interaction between Jonathan and David, but David's grief as he mourns the loss of his best friend. Here's what we read. How the mighty have fallen in battle. Jonathan lies slain on your heights. I grieve for you, Jonathan, my brother. You were very dear to me. Your love for me as wonderful, more wonderful than that of a woman. Again, I think we read this with our modern Western eyes and think, how can there not be sexual intimacy attached to it? There's no way that's just a friendship. But we think that because we've lost the art of deep friendship. We've lost the art of virtuous friendship, of spiritual friendship. We don't really even get the concept. Deep, true, virtuous, spiritual friendships are uncommon in our culture. They're considered at best nice, but certainly not essential. We live in a culture we could probably make an argument that even belittles committed friendships. But even Jesus, before his execution at the hands of the Jewish religious authorities and the Roman Empire, sort of conspiring against him, Jesus redirects his relationship with his first followers from servant to friendship. And he says this, he says, I no longer call you servants because a servant doesn't know his master's business. He goes on, he says, from now on, I'm calling you friends. Apparently, a friendship relationship with Jesus, that is what reflects a deep, more mature relationship than having a servant relationship. We don't necessarily think like that. I think we think, well, sure, we talk about friendship. I mean, right now, your kids over at Kids Church, you know what they're learning? They're learning some small group leader is telling them that they can be forever friends with Jesus. We think talking about our relationship with Jesus as friends is childish, and when we grow up, we become servants of God. Not for Jesus. For Jesus, someone spiritually grown up is a friend. That's how you interact. And you can't become spiritually grown up without 1 to 4 committed spiritual friendships that inspire you towards Jesus' likeness. And neighborhood, listen, there's really no simpler way to change the world. It's really not. Be a friend. Be a friend. Be a good friend, a true, deep, meaningful, virtuous, spiritual friend. If you can be a friend, you can change the world. If you can be a friend, you can change the world. This is our invitation. Simply be a friend. Jesus asks for your friendship with him, and he says, go, and he offers his friendship to us, and he says, then go and do likewise. Go be friends. Be someone who cares. Be someone who gives their life away. Be someone who lets others into their story. Be someone who stays there once the entertainment value's gone. After the shared goal's been accomplished, be there. Hang in there. Will you be friends that agree on every single topic? No. I mean, listen, I don't know why we've ever thought that friends have to agree on every single topic. I mean, you're never going to be friends with anybody if that's the case, right? I actually know people. I have had friends in my life that have stopped being my friend because we disagreed on some topics, right? I know other people, like I can't be friends with someone of the other, who identifies with the other political party. Grow up. I mean, honestly, that is ridiculous and childish behavior. Right? Deep, true, meaningful friendship assumes disagreement. You're your own person still, right? But you're not friends because you agree. You're friends because you see the value in the person, right? I have friends, close friends, true friends, that I think are idiots on some subjects, right? Just like, oh my gosh, how do you even think that? And they think the same about me. That's fine, whatever, no big deal, right? But this is all, listen, this is what the church of Jesus has to offer the world. We are not competing with Disneyland, Netflix, or TikTok. We lose. We lose. We can't compete with the internet to inform people. We can't compete with academia to educate people. Do you know what we have? We have community. We have friendship. Real, authentic relationships. That's what we have. That are bigger than Republican or Democrat or whatever other category you can divide yourselves into. Jesus constantly modeled crossing cultural boundaries to extend friendship to others. And if we're going to follow him, and if you're here and you're a Jesus person, that's the whole deal. You follow him, you've got to do the same. And it looks different for every one of us, and we've all got our personalities taken to play. I get it. It's not as easy as I'm making it sound, but I get a half hour. So, I get it. But this is what we have. This is the one thing we have that nobody else has. We get to reclaim and redeem friendship and offer it to the people in our lives. Can you be true, best, virtuous, spiritual friends with everybody? Of course not. That's why we need those entertainment friends and those purpose friends and all of that. I mean, yes. Really like 1 to 4. That's about it. Right? But that's what we have. That's what we can do. That's what we have that the rest of the world does not have. I'll close with Muhammad Ali, the great one. Friendship is the hardest thing in the world to explain. It's not something you learn in school, but if you haven't learned the meaning of friendship, you really haven't learned anything. Can I pray for us? Jesus, thanks. We've all known, I think, the joys and pain that can come with friendship. We're so grateful. We're so grateful that you've extended friendship to us and you invite us to be friends with you, and then to turn around and just offer that to other people. I mean, that's sort of the whole deal, Jesus, and help us to just be that and not make this too complicated, but to, again, see friends as something we need, not just as individuals, but friends as the thing, the device that holds society together. Help us to understand that we should be a spiritual friend to some people, and we need some in our lives. We cannot do this alone. Jesus, we love you, and it's in your name we pray. Amen.